So we are live. Hi, John. Nice to see you today.
Good to see you as always, Kate.
Yeah.
I'm here as Clinical Director for Postcards for Parents, proudly in that role.
Yeah, and I'm Kate Howe. I'm co-founder of Postcards for Parents. So today we're talking about parent self-care. We talk about, every month we talk about 4 topics. 3 of them have to do with our kids, and one of them focuses on parents, which they're always very intertwined, but it's we know that you can't parent well when you're not feeling well yourself. So this month we're talking about relaxation, and it's tied with it being the summertime, and it's a time when at least the idea is that we should all be able to relax more than during the year, although I'm not I don't know that it always works out that way. So but relaxation is good for us, so we're going to talk about how parents might relax a little bit more. So my first question is, is anxiety the opposite of relaxation? And why do we need to relax? Why is there so much anxiety? What is that dynamic between?
Let me, I'll speak to this not as not as the definitive authority, but as somebody who's wandered around in this area a good deal over the course of my professional life. Just a real backstep in terms of the importance of self-care for parents. My favorite metaphor has always been, the oxygen mask that drops down in the event of an emergency on an airplane, and they are always given instructions. If you're taking care of somebody, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because if you don't, you're going to pass out and be no good to yourself or anybody else. So I think that self-care, figuring out what that means for you and how to access it, it's critical. It's critical to you. It's critical to your role as a parent. So, on to the issue of anxiety. What is anxiety? Well, I actually have I can get a little bit, troubled by our culture's response to the notion of anxiety. I very often will have parents contact me with a concern around anxiety in their child or their adolescent. And it's not to say that their child or their adolescent isn't anxious. Anxiety is a part of it's a part of life. It comes from a large portion of it comes from our lower brain, which is, all about protecting us. It is a response to the fact that there is some potential peril. And the peril may be physical, it may be emotional, it may be relational. But anxiety, I think the only time we really get away from it is when they plant us. So, I think that's the moment when we're no longer here to worry about anything, to no longer feel any kind of anxiety. Now, does that mean that anxiety can't sometimes just become, enormous and really, really problematic? Of course it can. Of course it can. And it's not to say that there aren't such things as anxiety disorders that where people go across the barrier. But I think more often than not, one of the challenges we have, and I think we're in a culture where we see, lots and lots of advertisements for pharmaceuticals that are to treat anxiety, they're to treat depression, and that we begin to get anxious about being anxious. We begin to get anxious about seeing our kids anxious. Anxiety it's just a developmental norm. And the dilemma is that when we are anxious about our kids' anxiety, we don't dial it down. We get into this cycle of really dialing up. Now, it doesn't mean, once again, that you don't have some kids who are just more prone to a deeper level or nature of worry. But I think that the most important thing we can do as a parent, which goes back to the whole issue of attachment, is how do we manage difficult emotion? Well, we manage it in the context of co-regulation. We manage it in the context of coming together with someone who knows how to help us feel felt and allows us to not be alone with whatever it is. If we come together with someone who's anxious about our anxiety as a parent or as a partner, it's problematic. But But I'm not saying parents aren't supposed to be worried about their kids, because of course they are. But I think it takes us back to our topic today, which is, how do you take care of yourself as a parent so that your anxiety doesn't really rise to a point where your experience, your ability to be present with your child's anxiety, and kind of dampen that by just being present, where that gets impeded by your anxiety. So, and self-care is a part of that. And what it is, just figuring out what it is that you can do, what works for you, in allowing that. For me, anxiety feels like a vibration. When I'm anxious, I can get anxious, or the fun. Oftentimes, I won't know exactly what I'm anxious about. But for me, it's just this internal state of mild vibration, and my heart's not at ease. There's something going on. So figuring out what are the things that you do that are accessible to you, that help quiet your spirit, that don't, you're not, if you're anxious about, something important, the climate change, COVID, those are real things to be anxious about. But it doesn't mean that we can't go from being anxious in a way like this that leaves us trying to kind of understand and fix what we can't fix, to a place of acceptance that allows us to say, okay, this is where we are. We're not there alone, and we move forward.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I appreciate the discussion about children's anxiety, because that is at kind of record levels, but really, even I want to separate that a little bit from just like the parent's own experience of anxiety, whether it is about like big things like COVID or climate change, or about
or not. Sometimes we don't know what it's about. I mean, I think the most difficult anxiety is oftentimes we sometimes refer to it as free-floating anxiety or unfocused anxiety. Just a sense of things not being quite right. Maybe there are 10 different things you could say, well, those things aren't quite right. But 5 days ago, those 10 different things weren't making me feel this way. Today, those same 10 things, if I were to say, what is it? So it's complicated. I don't think for parents, for all of us, the process of managing anxiety, which is a normative aspect of the human experience, is sometimes easier than others.
Yeah. So I hear a couple things that are helpful, which is, we don't have to get anxious about having anxiety, right? So it's normal to have it, and it's sort of, I think sometimes people react to anxiety by thinking, because I'm feeling anxious, that must mean that something is really wrong, instead of kind of being like, I feel anxious, like separating it from yourself in a way, and kind of thinking about how to manage both what may or may not be wrong, and then feelings that kind of may or may not be precisely calibrated to what's right or wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's often the task at hand, and I think that we're typically not real proud of the fact that we're anxious. There's a little bit of shame about it, and sometimes we're afraid that if we let people see we're anxious, well, then they're going to act like we're anxious, and I don't want to suggest for a moment that it's this really easy thing to tie up in a bow and say, oh, it's not.
Yeah.
But what you just said, are learning to not be too tough on ourselves and accept that it's a part of the deal, and then look for some of the strategies that are useful to you. And one of them is almost always going to be connection. But there are other things too that can be really helpful.
I think that's a great point about it being sort of something that we don't typically want to share. I mean, obviously, we all probably know people who are constantly sharing how anxious they are, but that's not kind of seen. Maybe that's not the way that the culture, or the advertisements, the movies kind of make us aspire to be. So then there's this like thinking I should be different, and you hide it, and then you don't share it with people who could help you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. And then, but so then if we talk specifically about parents, I mean, so parents have their own lives, their own, jobs, global issues. Maybe they're more worried about global issues because they're thinking of their child living on into the future and household, et cetera. And then they have this whole added layer of anxiety around caring so much for another person, your child, who you can't really control, you can't always keep safe. So how would you say that parents have more anxiety than other people in your experience?
Yeah. I think that, part of the cost of loving something is to be apprehensive or anxious about losing it or it becoming hurt. And I think as parents, you feel a tremendous responsibility to protect your kids. Mm-hmm. And do I think that parents are more likely to have debilitating anxiety? I don't think so, because I think that one of the things that sometimes pulls us from our anxiety is a sense of obligation. I can't be too big of a mess about this because my kid needs me to not be too big of a mess. I think that there is a gift in that level of responsibility. There's a challenge, and it's not easy. But I think that not having that kind of, and I'm not saying people without children don't have people that they love and they feel obligated to help, because of course they do. But I think people with children do have a built-in sense of purpose. And I think purpose can pull us away from our fears. I think that if you look at what happens in the trenches, or you look at what happens in a revolt, there's a sense of purpose that allows us to overcome our fear and to not focus on our fear, because our fear immobilizes us. And anxiety and fear, they are first cousins.
Mm-hmm. So that's so interesting. So it's sort of like anxiety is like when you're not being active in a way, or when you're like thinking about what could happen instead of when you are actually taking action. Is that right? But is it just then kind of postponed when you're taking action, or does it dissipate?
I think some of us never stop taking action, so maybe it's postponed.
Right.
I mean, that's one way. That's one way of dealing with it.
Right.
Some people are just almost hypomanic. They're just constantly needing to do. You and I had talked before about the impact of vacation. Maybe we're going to have a question about that a little later. But I think the first thing that happens for many of us when we really step away, as much as we can step away these days, when we really step away, it is, for me, typically the initial period is not particularly comfortable. It is this kind of rush of thoughts and concerns, and that it takes a little while to be able to kind of settle in to kind of letting those things go. Because I think when we're focused and mindful about efforts to let things go, then we shift into a mode of kind of, all right, I let it go, with a kind of gentleness in the acceptance of the fact that it's not always easy to let it go. I think when we are not in a mindful state around the things that we're anxious or worried about, we tend to lock down more. And in that, I think we actually keep ourselves kind of within a loop that's more problematic. And so, I think downtime is important, but I think you also have to go into it probably knowing it's going to take you a little while to kind of let go. One of the, and I'm not saying our lives are generally like that of war veterans, but we know that one of the hardest things about coming back from active engagement in combat is oftentimes the sense of emptiness, the sense of because they've become kind of adjusted to, if not accustomed and maybe even addicted to, that level of anxiety. And so I think that just recognizing with combat veterans, the coming back is not easy because they feel empty, and many of them will go back into combat as a means of managing that. Not that being a parent or just living day-to-day life is the same as being a soldier in a combat situation, but there are aspects of it where there are parallels. And so stepping away doesn't always initially give us the opportunity to feel what we hope it's going to feel. It often takes some time to let it go and then be in a better place.
Right. Well, I mean, I can really recognize, what you said about some people, the solution to, action, kind of relieving the anxiety, is to always be active. And then what happens when you stop, which is what a
Well,
vacation
I
is.
think,
Yeah.
yeah,
So but it's not good to always be in that, for your body to always be in that heightened level. So what
it
is
is
supposed to
not.
happen with
It is.
relaxation?
It is not good. I mean, ultimately, there's an awareness that I can't just keep dancing. I just can't keep doing it. And there'll be, a kind of apprehension that, and sometimes it happens in midlife. Sometimes, there's different points where it seems to happen.
Mm.
This awareness that I can't just keep doing it this way, but I have no idea how else to do it. And I'm not sure what's going to happen when I stop doing so much and start moving into more of a state of being than a state of doing. And there's a real apprehension with that.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to give a top line of kind of how to kind of move between those states?
Yeah. I mean, I think that first of all is recognizing it. It's on some level going, you know what? I am kind of frenetic in the way I'm living my life. I'm doing a lot. And one of the things as a parent, the more we do, the less present we are for our kids. We're doing things for them, but we're not. That compromises our ability to be really present. And so I think one of the things, if you have children, if you're lucky enough to have children, recognize that children, in many respects, particularly the younger ones, they're little gurus. They live in the moment. That's they're there. And that it doesn't mean that you may not have a child who loves to keep finding different activities to do. But I think that just anything that allows you to slow down, whether it's getting down on the floor and playing trucks with a 5-year-old, or if it's going for a walk in the woods and getting yourself to stop and be kind of consciously aware of how the sunlight looks like it's dancing, or when you take a shower, to stop for a moment and be conscious of the way that the warm water feels as it moves down your body. There are just a lot of different things. It's really about coming back in to the present, because anxiety is almost always associated with anticipation or reflection. And that when we come back in and get tied to the moment, and our bodies are one of the best things to tie us to the moment, our bodies, and then connection with other creatures who are in the moment more, whether that be a dog or a cat or a little one. These are all things that kind of bring you back to the moment and allow you to sit. A meditation practice is all about a discipline. It's about learning how to have all those thoughts about anticipation concerns and reflection concerns, having those just coming up and knowing they're going to come up, and gently letting them just drift away. Don't try to stop them, accept them, and then gently let them drift away. So, I mean, I think that process of moving from doing too much as a way of managing your own anxiety, and it's sometimes referred to as a hypomanic flight from insight. It means you build up all of this energy, and you're almost manic, and it's to avoid the feelings that are really occurring. And that consciousness be conscious of that and saying, all right, I need to do something different. For some people, exercise is a wonderful way to do that. Running or yoga, or there are many different avenues. But the body is almost always, body meaning your physical experience of exercise, movement, your physical experience of breath. The body almost always is the avenue back to the moment. Although relationship and connection with other things that are in the moment, such as animals and such, can also be really helpful.
Thank you. That's super helpful. I guess so then, but for parents, you never want to kind of turn off your vigilance in a way, or your kind of, monitoring for your child. Is there a way to kind of be with both of those things?
Well, I would say, Kate, in a lot of ways, most of the things that we need to really know about our kids come through empathy and intuition. And that empathy and intuition are not left brain kind of linear observational aspects of our personhood. They are more right brained. And I think you're far more likely to miss important things by being too attuned to how your kids' grades are, or which kids they're hanging out with, or whether they got in for curfew. I'm not saying you don't have to deal with some of that stuff too, but it is in being present with your child in a way where you're not vibrating, because their anxiety, anxiety, I always like the idea, it's like a bell that's ringing. And as somebody who's helping co-regulate, like a parent, because we know that when that bell is ringing, when we're anxious, it compromises cognitive efficiency. It makes us less adaptive. Now, it can sometimes, at small levels, can help motivate us. I would have never got through graduate school had it not been for anxiety. I procrastinated crazy. And then I would go, holy cow, what a mess. I've got to do something. The anxiety would build up, and I could be pretty efficient in that kind of focused anxiety. But for the most part, anxiety undermines our ability. So if that bell is ringing, we want to be the blanket that wraps around it and dampens it. If that bell is ringing and we're like a piece of metal that comes to try to stop it, it just vibrates at the same resonance. So I think that the being vigilant, we have huge responsibility to be present, to know our children from the inside out. But knowing the inside is about being quiet. It's largely through empathy that we gain those insights, and also knowing something about our own inside, having an emotional awareness of our own inner life makes it much easier for us to recognize the inner life in our kids, actually help them begin to name and label some of those inner feelings. And that's all wonderfully helpful in terms of anxiety, because if we say one of the most powerful things to help with anxiety is connection, if a child or an adult has no emotional language, they don't know how to label these things, then they're wholly dependent on the attunement of another. And, it's nice when they can kind of give you a little help and say, this is what I think is going on. Or, we've got to be vigilant.
I love that answer. That was like the easiest, most win-win answer you've ever given yet, which is just like, if you relax, they're kind of more safe and vigilant, right? Or they're more safe, and you don't need that vigilance really, because being with them is more effective, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think if you show up, if you show up, more often than not, they will. But
and
showing up is showing up being, not doing.
Yep. Okay, so the last kind of question, just about the ways that families interact and might either kind of like help each other relax, or help maybe create anxiety for each other. I'm really interested in what you're saying about connection is one of the best tools to fight anxiety, whether it's of a parent or of a child. And I just also kind of want to underline that it's like, I think that we take anxiety as like meaning that there's a reason to be anxious, but maybe that's not, we don't need to think that. It's like, it's like that fire alarm going off, or the smoke alarm. We can check if there's a fire, but there's not automatically one, right?
No, I think that I love the idea of the amygdala, like a smoke detector, and it sends incoming perceptions to the upper brain, where it can think about it and kind of come up with an eloquent response, or it goes to the lower brain, and you go into fight, flight, or freeze. And that some smoke detectors, some amygdalas, because of life experiences, have been very sensitized, and they go off. And when they go off, if you're mindful, you can say, is it toast burning, or is the house really on fire? And that ability to go, I know that alarm goes off because it's gone off it's gotten sensitized by my childhood, by my recent experience, whatever. And so yeah, it's being mindful in looking at that, and then saying, all right, what way do I want to go in response to this experience of some degree of peril that is felt as anxiety, maybe acute, more than more chronic.
Okay, but so back to this question.
Yeah, how do families relax? Well, I think you know how much I am grateful and drawn to Dan Hughes's acronym of PACE. The way that we relax as a family together, I think that P in PACE, which is playful, capacity to be playful together, is phenomenally connecting. It is also difficult to be playful and frightened. Playfulness is a very, very powerful tool. One of the most effective ways to make a child more anxious is to see how worried their parents are about them. That doesn't help. But if they get a sense that their parent can feel what they're feeling, the parent knows that. He knows them. The child feels felt, and then the parent moves into a stance of playfulness. Wow, all right, the parent knows me, and we're connecting through playfulness, and playfulness also means, well, it's difficult to, we don't get real playful when we're, tied to the railroad track and the train's coming. It's boy, that's an old reference. That's Dudley Do-Right cartoons from my childhood. But I think that playfulness is incredibly important. Just being together, laying down and looking at the clouds together, having a bowl of sherbet and just talking about how delicious it is. It's bringing you back to the body and back to the moment.
So it's less about being on vacation and having every moment filled with activities, or seeing all the sights, et cetera. I mean, maybe not all families feel like this, but I feel like there is maybe in our culture like a sense of like, oh, we have to be doing and taking advantage of the time and kind of like filling it with fun stuff. And then there's a sense that like just doing nothing is not as good. It's not as good.
Yeah, I mean, I've got an illustration from a few weeks ago. My wife and I took our 3 grandkids over to New Hampshire. It was about a 100-mile drive, and stayed for 2 nights in a nice hotel there. And we were taking them to an amusement park called Storyland. And there's no question in my mind that if we would have just and then we went miniature golfing with them. If we would have just backed that thing up and stayed at the swimming pool and played in the pool with them, it would have been absolutely an easier and more fun trip for everybody. That just being in playing, because what happens when you're in the pool with kids, you end up playing things, whether you're a shark or you're trying to throw each other off the raft or you're playing frisbee in the water, whatever it is, that playfulness is so wonderful. And I think that it is oftentimes, once you decide there's this fun thing that we're going to do, in this case, it would be going to an amusement park, which is really not my idea of fun, but it's not that you can't have fun at a place like that, but it is that you are probably as likely to have a real kind of connecting fun in more quiet kinds of activities, going for a walk in the woods and looking for frogs or cool colored leaves, or sitting, playing in the pool, doing, going on an adventure, walking through the whole hotel, trying to figure out all the different places that you can get into, just little stuff that makes kind of low stress adventures that are about you coming together. One of my favorite moments of this trip with the grandkids was sometimes pools don't allow you to bring rafts in. They don't want inflatables for whatever reason, probably some safety issue. And we were on the 4th floor. And the pool was on the 1st floor. So we decided that we were going to sneak, and we all had rafts. We were going to sneak them down the staircase and make our way to the pool without ever being caught, so nobody could tell us we couldn't take them. And that was probably the joy that these kids had in conspiring together, seeing if anybody was coming. I mean, it's little stuff like that that's playful and silly. That I'm not saying I always hit that spot. I don't, but I hit it in that moment. And so it's fun, it's silliness, it's playfulness that I think cause families to relax the most.
So why do you think we work so hard to create these experiences that may end up being less fun and relaxing?
I think it's because we trust more in what we do than who we are. I think there's that sense, and we live in a culture that where it's impacted by science. It's been, there's a lot that left brain of ours is very much valued in our traditional culture, in our current culture, and its ability to learn and have thoughtful experiences and such. And I don't think that we have nearly enough kind of affirmation of the importance and the power of presence, of just with our kids, of just slowing it down. We think we're going to go do this thing. Well, that's we're going to go to Storyland, and that, kids love Storyland, and they've gone there before. And it's not to say that that's all wrong, but it isn't all right either.
So the takeaway is you can do less.
You can do less and probably have more in the way of relaxation and connection.
Great. All right.
And if you can pull your grandchildren into a criminal act together, there's a lot of bonding that goes with that, apparently.
Well, and probably as a parent, if you're not worried about, the ticket purchase and where you're going to park and what is everybody going to eat, has everybody going to the bathroom, and where's the sunscreen, you might have a little bit more of that energy to kind of actually do those games or the fun moments with your child. Yeah.
Go look for frogs, those sort of things. And our kids can get addicted to those activities as well. And so it is sometimes helping them learn how to have a quieter experience of relaxation, really of fun, of the restorative experience of being somewhere that's more in the moment than doing some packaged thing that's supposed to be, fun for you.
Super. Well, this has been really enlightening. And in the spirit of doing less, I think this is one of our shortest conversations. So we should just go relax for the next 15 minutes.
I like that idea, Kate.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we'll be back next week. And thank you so much. Have a great week.
Thank you, Kate. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.